4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, folks, it's been a very hectic couple of days. We kick off the final hour of the week here, and we're going to be well informed and keep you up to date on the latest developments in both the airline story and the Gaza Strip story. You know, I hear the word invasion used, and I know Israel prefers to call it incursion. And if you look at the dictionary definition of both, if you look under invasion, you'll see a synonym is incursion and vice versa, kind of. But from what I've been able to gain, and you may interpret it differently, invasion kind of implies taking over, occupying, annexing land and planning to stay there. You've invaded the territory and you're going to keep it. Incursion, to a lesser extent, has that implication. And obviously, Israel has made it perfectly clear they have no desire whatsoever and do not plan to reoccupy the Gaza Strip. They're in there for a definitive amount of time, for a definitive purpose, and then they're going to get out. So I will go with incursion, as is the Israeli definition, as opposed to invasion, which seems to be the media's definition and the Palestinian definition. All right, we're going to be joined right now by Richard Perle, but first let's watch this oldie but goodie from Hillary and the Russian foreign minister.
I wanted to present you, which represents what President Obama and Vice President Biden and I have been saying, and that is, we want to reset our relationship. And so we will do it together.
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. We worked hard to get the right Russian word. Do you think we got it?
You get it wrong.
I got it wrong.
All right, folks, that is going to be used in any campaign against Hillary Clinton, I can assure you. And joining us now, as mentioned, is Richard Perle, fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, former chair of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board, and former Assistant Secretary of Defense. Joins us now. Hello, sir.
Hello, it's good talking to you.
Well, it's good talking. You sound like you're right here in the room. That's great. All right, let's start with, of course, Russia and the Malaysian airline. The president today calling for an immediate ceasefire and talking about the fact that the Russian rebels, who we believe are responsible for this, received sophisticated training, steady flow of support from Russia, including these weapon systems, these missiles. He stopped short of putting a finger on Vladimir Putin when it comes to responsibility, but did certainly insinuate that the responsibility did lie there. As far as what we might do next, no further military action on the part of the United States. He did call it a European tragedy, and we need a credible investigation. So is it kind of what you expected Obama to eventually say, as he did today?
Well, I certainly didn't expect him to make the kind of fundamental revision in our policy toward Russia that should have been made a long time ago. That clip of Hillary reminds us that she said on that occasion, "We'll do this together." And of course, that isn't what happened. We did it alone. There was no reset on Putin's part. Russian policy has continued pretty much the same, opposing U.S. interests practically everywhere, occasionally doing something that looks cooperative. But when you look closely at the things that look cooperative, they are in fact even more in the Russian interest than in our own, which explains it. So you have a Russian leader in Mr. Putin, who's a man of the KGB, who's bitter about the defeat of the Soviet Union in the Cold War, and who operates against the United States with a certain glee at every opportunity.
He's going to get away with this too. I mean, they're not going to pin it on him. He already was quoted yesterday as saying that basically it's Ukraine's fault. And the plane never should have been allowed to fly into this space where there are hostilities going on. But I mean, do you see him, walking away from this the way he walked away from taking Crimea?
Well, he's certainly not going to acknowledge any responsibility,
Right.
Even though the so-called rebels are in fact under the effective operational control of his security services and have been from the very beginning.
Yeah, but as far as repercussions, I mean, some more sanctions maybe when all is said and done and the investigation is complete. And, who even knows if we'll find the black boxes? There were reports that they were taken to Russia. There were reports that the missile battery and radar system that was used to shoot down this plane have been taken to Russia. So regardless of what the investigation finds, do you see, any real repercussions from the United States against Putin eventually?
I rather doubt it. If there are additional sanctions, it is likely to be in the context of additional Russian activity with respect to Ukraine. And that has not abated from the very beginning. It's not stopping with Crimea. And it's not stopping with Ukraine. Putin has the ambition to reconstruct as much as he can of the old Soviet empire. This doesn't mean taking physical possession, but it means that he wants a world in which decisions made in all of the countries that were once part of the Soviet Union to be made consistent with Moscow's wishes. That's his policy.
Yeah.
And he will continue to work away at it. And we have been foolish to think that it's anything else.
Let's move on to the situation in the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, of course, Israel launching a ground incursion into Gaza. Today, the president did address that. He mentioned, went out of his way to say he spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu, and while reaffirming support for the Israelis to defend themselves against the tunnels and the missile attacks, once again, kind of morally equated the two by saying, but I expressed our concern over civilian casualties, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about what Israel needs to do here. Of course, I think the straw that broke the camel's back might have been the 13 Hamas terrorists that came through one of those tunnels by a kibbutz and were thankfully stopped and eradicated before they could do what they wanted to do. But Israel realizing that if they don't get rid of those tunnels, there's a tragedy waiting to happen.
Well, the real tragedy here, at least with respect to American policy, is the apparent inability to say that not only do the Israelis have the right to defend themselves when they're attacked in this way, but we have no sympathy for Hamas, which is undertaking these attacks. The apparently human gesture of expressing concern about the Palestinian casualties, which everyone understands, only has the effect of encouraging Hamas to believe that it can win political victories. Their strategy is very simple. They launch rockets at Israel. Israel retaliates. They showcase the products of the retaliation, which is damage on the Palestinian side. And they are using that in a grand strategy of delegitimizing the state of Israel. And we mustn't play along with that.
That's what the Palestinians have always done. And that's the rock throwing and the slingshot shooting of rocks at soldiers that goes on every single day, kind of in hopes that there'll be a casualty or a tragedy that they can exploit and that the media would run with. And you're absolutely right. But for this president, to constantly, and yesterday the State Department in even stronger terms, to scold Israel for civilian casualties, specifically those 4 teenagers on the beach, which begs the question: what parents allow their kids out on a beach during bombings anyway? But it just doesn't stop, and it won't stop with this president. Do you ever see it changing? I mean, it seems to only get worse.
No, I think it's a reflexive action. It's a little worse with this president. Other presidents have done something similar. It's the natural tendency of the State Department, which will express a sort of relativist view given half a chance. The Israelis go to such unprecedented lengths to try to avoid civilian injury that they deserve to be praised for it, and they deserve to be praised for it by the President of the United States, even while it is going on. What I would like to hear Obama say is the Israelis make an extraordinary effort. They warn, they telephone, they send text messages, they drop leaflets, they even drop non-destructive bombs well in advance of an attack in order to facilitate the safe evacuation of civilians. Hamas, on the other hand, fires rockets at innocent civilians. You've got to be clear about what's at issue here, and unfortunately, we're not nearly clear enough. And the virtue of clarity is that it takes away whatever political advantage Hamas hopes to achieve by cultivating casualties which they can then exploit.
And Marco Rubio, and we highlighted this in a segment I called Give Me Five earlier in the show, 20-minute speech on the floor of the Senate saying everything you have just said and more, and kudos to him for that. And thank you, sir. Really appreciate your time as always.
It's always a pleasure. All the best.
You too. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Richard Perle, ladies and gentlemen, American Enterprise Institute Fellow and former Assistant Secretary of Defense. And it's just so true. By constantly bringing up Israel's killing of civilians in the context of what's going on, it just encourages Hamas to keep doing what they're doing. And I think Obama does know that. All right, folks, more straight ahead on the Steve Malzberg Show.